So you
So I
joined
joined the infantry. Yeah.
the infantry. So was there, when you get to the infantry, are you thinking already, uh, I want to go to the SAS? Did you even know what the SAS was at that point in time?
Well, yeah. I mean, I was well schooled in the military side of things because I grew up with it.
Right.
And I guess although it didn't feel abnormal to me, I just didn't really think that it was my only option or something that I was definitely going to do. So that's going back to what about my brothers. They were always going to join the army. That was all they wanted to do. For me, I didn't necessarily have all my eggs in one basket. And so when I eventually did do that, then my mind, I kind of turned the dials a little bit because I found out that when I did join the military, I really liked it. I really enjoyed it. And also, I was very good at it. And finally, for me, it was like, well, I went through school and was kind of subconsciously conditioned to believe that I wasn't really good at anything apart from art. I was good at art in school. That was it. I was good at making stuff out of wood and metal and paint and drawing and all that. But I didn't really think I could do anything with any of that. And so when I then joined the army and I was, very fit, physically fit, and I was coming first in all the tests, and I just took to it really well, and I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the camaraderie more than anything. It was just like being around guys my age and maybe a bit older, and we had such a good laugh. It was such a good time, and everything was done for you as far as logistics are concerned. You got paid at the end of the month. You got a bed to sleep in. You had a roof over your head. You were fed 3 meals a day. You had social time. You had a lot of security and safety and certainty as a result of that. So for a young boy or a young man, just through adolescence and getting into adulthood, it was a nice place to be. So when it comes to the whole SAS thing and did I know what it was, I was very aware of it and I was obsessed with this movie. I was obsessed with a movie called Who Dares Wins. Lewis Collins. It's a classic movie. It was like kind of around the time. I think it was made not long after the Iranian embassy siege. So it was loosely the framework was loosely kind of based on something similar, but it was a bunch of people that took over the American embassy, and there was a siege, and then obviously the SS and did a rescue mission. Um, and I remember being obsessed with that film because there's one particular scene for anyone who's seen that movie. There's an unforgettable scene where they're running through the American embassy, and Lewis Collins is like he's in there as an agent, and he's undercover, and so, and he's actually a retired SAS guy. He was kicked out of the SAS, but he ends up in with this. He ends up gathering intelligence and getting in with this woman who's one of the heads of this organization. And there's a part in the movie where the SAS come in and they storm the embassy, and he links up with them, and he's just got like a white shirt with an open collar, and he's a real handsome bloke, and he's like a real cool guy. He died a few years ago, unfortunately, but he'd have been an amazing James Bond, by the way. That I always thought he should have been James Bond. But regardless, that's another story for another day. There's a part in it where they're like on V formation, running down the corridor of the embassy, and he's point man, and he's got this white shirt with the open collar and a pair of black trousers on, and he's running with this machine gun, and all the SAS guys in black and respirators are behind him in arrow formation. It's just like the coolest thing ever, and the music's really cool. And if you've ever seen that movie as a young kid, that was like I want to be that. That's what I want to do. So I guess when I joined the army, um, you're asked about all these things. You're given information on what all the other regiments are, how the military works as a whole organization. And I remember being week one in basic training, and the platoon commander said, "Does anyone know what this cap badge means?" And it was a picture of the winged dagger. Who dares wins? And I put my hand up and says the SAS, and he says, "Is anyone here any aspirations to ever join this organization?" And me and one other put our hands up, me and one of my friends, and ended up leaving the army, and I ended up joining about 5 years later. So it did actually. I kind of manifested that.
That's incredible.
Yeah,
And to a reference point, I don't know if you're familiar. The story you just told is very interesting because there's a movie a lot of American tier one guys will talk about. It's called Red Dawn. It's from the
yeah,
1980s. And I have
True.
had so many guys that were either
Hmm.
on SEAL Team 6 or Delta Force. They said when I was a kid, I was, maybe they were like 10, 12, whatever. They're like, the first time I saw that movie, all I ever wanted to do after that was run around and
Yeah.
shoot communists in the mountains. It's like they
Yeah.
universally love that movie, which it's interesting because you kind of have roots to a movie of your own.
It is. It's a great movie. I suppose it's a transatlantic thing, right? We could relate to the British movie rather than something American because in the UK you're a very small island, and I guess that there's not as much association with what's going on across the pond. So American movies are very Hollywood, and although Who Dares Wins was still very far fetched, it was the because it was a British made film, because it was probably a bit more resonance to us guys growing up there.
So when you make the decision that you're going to attempt SAS selection, is it something where they come to you and they're like, "Hey, we think you could potentially be good fit here," or do you have to initiate that process of trying to make that? How's that work?
They don't come to anyone. I mean, they've never had a although recruitment is fairly sparse, excuse me, but they don't headhunt anyone. It doesn't happen. Uh, because it's a volunteer, you've got to do it as a volunteer. And so, I mean, they will do like recruitment presentations. So they have a team that goes to. I've actually done this myself. I did it with. It was quite one of the coolest things I ever did. Actually, was after I had been in the SAS for probably a couple of years. I went back to my old unit, and delivered a presentation on selection process on the SAS, in an effort to try and recruit other guys to come forward, because it's one of those things. It's like the big scary monster in the closet. No one wants to look in there. It's the fear of failure that gets people. So when it comes to that mystique around the SAS, that's it's like a double-edged sword, really, because they don't overtly say, "Come and join us. This is great, and everyone can have a go." They don't really want to be asking us, and I kind of get that. I kind of caught that from there and into what I do now. I've always been very kind of I'm not blasé about asking people to come on my coaching program, but then that's kind of it kind of it doesn't really serve my bigger purpose staying like that, because I want to help as many people as possible. And so the mystique's kind of cool, but it's double edged because people sometimes think it's not for them. So anyway, I volunteered for it because I just thought, I've always had this mindset, and I've always had this real hunger for doing things that no one else has done or people don't normally do. I like to be the guy who does something that not a lot of people are doing. I like to challenge myself. It's just all about a personal challenge, and maybe I could do that. Why not me? What if I could be the one to do that? So that's always been a mindset of mine. So when it came to going forward for the SAS, I didn't tell anybody at first. I just did it. I applied, and I wanted to keep it to myself. And I just applied for the joining instructions for the selection course. And I remember I was actually out in Kosovo at the time in 1999, and we were in a place called Podievo, and I never get any mail. No one sent me mail, so I got this letter through the door one day, and it was a brown envelope, and I always remember the day I opened this envelope, and it was my joining instructions for my pre-selection course. And I always remember that feeling that I took the paper from the envelope, and there was two winged daggers on the top of the paper, the headed paper, and I was just like, just the feeling I got from that was kind of like, this is now real. It's like this is a letter to me with this insignia on it, and it felt really special at the time because I was the first one to go for it in a long time, and the first one to ever pass since like the 1970s.
From okay, hold on. I got to ask about this. When you say the first one to pass since the 1970s, do you mean from the unit you were currently in?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
gotcha.
yeah. Not obviously there'd be no regiment, but
Yeah.
a bunch of old guys from the 60s. But um, yeah, so the last guy who had joined the SAS before me was actually my first ever commanding officer when I joined the infantry. When I joined, so the unit I joined was called the Royal Highland Fusiliers. It was a Scottish infantry battalion, and no one was in the SAS from there. And one guy had been, and that was the commanding officer. The guy who was in charge of the whole unit. and he had joined in the 70s. Um, and no one else had managed to get in since then. So you can imagine it's a bit like, sometimes others have got to succeed before other people will believe it's possible. Otherwise, if the opposite happens and people go forward and people fail, it kind of demoralizes future generations and just makes people think that what's the point in even trying, because he didn't get in and he's better than me in my mind. So why would they take me? So it was a big step, but then I suppose it was such a big step that there wasn't really any pressure. You could see it in two ways. It was a double-sided coin. In one hand, there's lots of pressure because it's a big step, and you're leaving yourself open to criticism if you don't get in. The told you so. People will be the first to say, well, I knew you were too young, or you were above your station, or you were out of your depth." And then in the flip side of that, there was no pressure at all because I thought, well, no one else is doing it. I don't really have anyone to compare against. It's not like I'm not doing what other people have done. I would be the first. So if I don't get in, then I'm just another one of the people that didn't get in. But if I do get in, then that's quite going to be pretty special. So that's what kept me motivated.
I love that. I love the mindset of that. But on the point of failure, you're talking about the fear of failure, maybe the scary monster in the closet. People don't want to open it up and look. Was there a moment when you were going through that selection where you thought to yourself, man, maybe I'm not really cut out for this? And if that did happen, how did you manage to push through it?
Yeah, lots of times. I mean, I suppose the 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 most obvious example of that I can think of as a memory was when we did the jungle training phase. So you go out to Brunei and excuse my Siri's just gone off there. Sorry,
No, it's fine.
must have been something. Must have been something I said that triggered it. Anyway, so when we go out to Brunei and do the jungle training, there's a lot of pressure on. It's probably the time where I think I was under the most pressure because everyone's watching you all the time. Everything you do, everyone's watching you, and the pressure does get to you, and you do question yourself. So it could be how long you let something stay in your head, and it's a mind game because if and they do this on purpose. They do this because they want to see how you'll handle it. Will you fold under pressure? Because if you fold under pressure on a training course, are you going to fold under pressure when the shit hits the fan in operations? And so it's a very testing environment. And that's what gets to a lot of people. A lot of people, they fail themselves. And I say this all the time. And this is something that if there's someone watching this now that is thinking maybe I should try SAS selection, then I would remember this is that they don't actually fail that many people. People seem to think there's just misconception of you get to the end and they fail loads of people. If you get to the very end, you pass. Not that many people get to the very end of selection, and then in fact, no one I've ever known has got to the very end and failed. You'll be gone before that point. But there's a pivotal point right in the middle, which is after the jungle phase, you're then midway through the course. So it's a 6 month course. End of the jungle phase, you're 3 months in. But that is really from that point on, you've got like they call them the hardcore element. So you've got the hardcore element that is left to do the rest of the course, and nothing else is quite as hard as the jungle. And so you've gotten through the worst or the hardest part. But I remember when we did the jungle phase, they don't tell you if you've passed. So you've got this huge waiting game. So you finish your training in the jungle, you get to the end of the exercise, you come out of the jungle, you de-rig all your kit, you have like a celebratory sort of we've finished night. We call it the smoker, which is like having a few beers and steaks and all that. And no one knows if they've passed. And there were some guys on my course that were like, "Oh yeah, I spoke to one of the DS last night, one of the staff. He gave me the wink and the nod, and he says, 'Don't worry, So some guys were getting this nod, and I was like, I didn't get a nod. No one winked at me, no one nodded at me. I don't know. I'm clueless. I don't know if I have passed. And so you then have the long haul flight all the way back to the UK, and I remember sat in the plane just in my own head so much, and I was reliving all the moments of all the little things that had happened, good, bad, and ugly. And I thought to myself, I'm not sure if I've really passed this or not. I knew I hadn't done anything bad. I knew I'd done pretty well, but you can never be sure. And because I was so young, I thought maybe they're going to tell me that I'm just too young, or because I've heard that before as well. They'd said to some people in the past that you're too young, go away and come back in 3 years' time. And that had happened. So I thought maybe I'm one of those guys. Anyway, got back to Hereford, and you then have a weekend away, and you come back, and that's sorry, before you go away for the weekend, it is before you depart for the weekend, you get told, and you get put in this one big room. Everyone goes in the same room. It's like a big cinema, training room, and the chief instructor comes in and he says the following names go and see the training officer, and my surname begins with B, so my surname is Bruce. So I was always quite early in the nominal roll, so they did it alphabetical order. And so they started reeling off these names. And as I was sat there, they got past B, they went on to C, D, and some people started, standing up and walking out the room. And then I've got to figure out which half am I in? Am I the people that staying going to fail, or the people that are going to fail? So I looked around the room, and all the guys who were still sat down were all the really good soldiers. And some of the guys who were stood up and walking out were the ones who were maybe told halfway through, you might not pass. So I was like 99% sure, I was like, I'm in the right half unless I made a mistake. And then they all left, and there was like less than half of us left in that room. So it'd been like chunked right down again. There's probably, like, I don't know, 20 people left or something out of like 250. And then we got the news that you guys are the hardcore element. Congratulations, you've passed. So and that was a huge moment for me. That was like I knew then. I thought, see, even if something happens after this, I've now got that far that no matter what happens, I did. I'm at the point now that no one else has actually done, which was a magical moment for me. But there was many times that I questioned myself. Absolutely, loads of times that I thought I might not be good enough or was going to fail. But one thing that didn't cross my mind was giving up. I honestly, hand on heart, not one time during the whole process did I ever consider throwing the towel in. And that's what a lot of people do. And I think that's the difference. They want guys that do not quit. Not the perfect guy, not the guy with all the skills already. Skills can be taught as long as you can adapt and assimilate new skills. That's what they want. They just want a really good basic platform to work from. Someone who's got all the basics dialed in and is willing to learn. Someone who's got humility. Someone who's willing to listen. So it's not about being the finished product. They create that. They mold you.
That's incredible. And I can't believe you just dropped that number that, you had 250 at one point, and now here you are 3 months in and there's 20 of you left. That must have been the
Yeah,
coolest
it's
feeling in the world.
really is. Yeah, I can't remember the exact numbers at start, but it's 250 odd, I think, and as my memory serves me. But when you arrive there day one, I always remember the training officer on his opening address. Uh, we use these vehicles in the British Army. They've changed now, but back in the day, we used to use those old vehicles. They were called a 4 tonner. Obviously, weighed 4 tons, and it was a big green vehicle, military people, like a troop carrier. And you can fit 18 people in the back of these troop carriers. And the training officer says there are 250 people in this room right now. He said, "Well, a massive hall. There are 250 people in this room," he said, "and by the end of this course, I will fit you all in the 1 4 tonner." And everyone's going gulp. It's like, holy shit, there's a lot of people to drop here. And he was wrong because there was actually slightly more, there was a few more past than could fit in a 4 tonner. They never usually got more than 18. And I think we got like 23 or something past. That was like 23 got through. I remember then in his closing address, he said, "At the beginning of this course, I said I would fit you all in the 1 4 tonner. I was wrong. So well done for proving me wrong." And, because we'd sort of exceeded that number by about 5 people. First course in a long, long time, I think.
One of the things that I'm curious about is I often hear guys who are Army Rangers who go to Delta Force. They say when they're in the Rangers, they're getting yelled at constantly. Guys are in their face. The instructors, it's F bomb this, F bomb that. But then when they go do Delta selection, they say one of the most unnerving parts of it is no one's yelling at you. No one's really telling you
Mm.
anything. You're
Yeah.
on your own, and they say that that messes with a lot of guys' heads because they're not getting the instruction, they're not getting the feedback, no one's screaming in their face. It's like you're kind of on your own, and we'll let you know at the end of the day whether or not you're going home. SAS, are they yelling at you a lot in training, or is it more like that, very professional? We're going to speak to you normally. We're not, this isn't a yelling fest.
Yeah, because you think about it, they're dealing with different types of soldiers. They're dealing with the most junior people on the course are going to have served at least 3 or 4 years in the military. They might have gotten the first rank, and you know that's like the junior element of selection. Usually, you've got like corporals and sergeants that are attending and beyond. And you've got a load of officers as well, captains and sometimes even majors. So they I don't think they feel the need to. Shouting and screaming and yelling at people isn't really. You're not trying to discipline people at that stage. People should show up for that course already disciplined. They already make their bed in the morning. They already have done all the shit that you have to do when you join the military, basic military school. So that it doesn't really have a place, and I don't think it lands very well. It's a bit like anything in life. I don't think raising your voice in a situation is not really going to teach anyone as well as good communication is that they will actually listen to.